Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and I wanted to have a little bit of fun on today's show. So what I decided to do is this. We're going to look at every single Raiders head coach candidate. In terms of the head coach candidates, only the people that are on this show are people that are confirmed the Raiders have submitted an interview request, which means only 7 coaches at the time that I'm making this video. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and I'm going to go in the order of when either the coach was interviewed or when that interview was requested to them. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to say who's the best guy for Ben Johnson at GM, who's the OC, who's the DC, and I'm going to put together the perfect duo, the perfect coaching staff based on who the Raiders could potentially hire as their head coach. Now, here's the thing. If you want creative videos around who the Raiders head coach and GM can be, hit that subscribe button. This is a little bit of a different show, and I do these because anybody can talk about news. Anybody can talk about a breaking news story, but when you're able to kind of peel the curtain back, have a little bit of fun, these are the type of shows that I wanted to make this show about. These are the type of shows that I sit at a bar with, that I sit with my buddies and I talk, if the Raiders hired Ben Johnson, who would they hire at OC? Who would they hire at DC? Who's the best GM fit with Ben Johnson? Well, luckily for you, that's the first guy that we're going to talk about here on today's show. So let's get into it. Ben Johnson interviewed with the Raiders on January 9th. Thanks to Tom Brady. It's already been documented that the only reason why he took that interview was because of TB12, and now when you look at a lot of the reports, it looks like the front runner to get that Raiders job is, in fact, the Lions OC. And I know the Raiders won't hold back in terms of cost. They're going to pay him whatever they need to be able to do. But the reason why I was excited to do this video is because the amount of times I was asked, Mitch, all right, you want Ben Johnson. Who do you think they end up pairing with Ben Johnson? Here's my prediction. If the Las Vegas Raiders, they go out and they hire Johnson, I think that they're going to end up hiring GM John Spytek. Why do I say that? Right after the Raiders had an interview with Johnson on the 9th, then they also interviewed Pete Carroll, and it sounds like right now Ben Johnson and Pete Carroll are the 2 front runners for the job. I said on this show, as soon as you got your front runners, start looking for GMs. The following day, the Raiders put in an interview request, and when you see a lot of the reasons of Spytek connections with Tom Brady, it makes a lot of sense. For Tanner Engstrand, the reason why I'm going to throw his name in the mix here, he's the Detroit Lions pass game coordinator. If I'm Ben Johnson, I go, I'm going to be the one calling the shots. I'm going to be the one calling the plays. So why would I not try to bring somebody in who's been with me the past 2 seasons to help me execute my offense? And then this is a name that I was told literally this morning. George Edwards, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker coach. I was told that Spytek thinks very, very highly of George Edwards, and Tom Brady loved what Edwards was able to do with Tampa Bay, because if you remember, one of the reasons why the Buccaneers were able to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in that Super Bowl was the amount of pressure, the amount of edge rush help that they were able to get. George Edwards is a name on a video that I'm going to do down the line, but if the Raiders end up hiring Ben Johnson, I think they go John Spytek, Tanner Engstrand, George Edwards. That's going to be your team with Ben Johnson. So how about this? What says you? Who's going to be the best GM to pair with Ben Johnson? I am all in on BJ. BJ's in Las Vegas, but I got to know, who's the best pairing with somebody like Ben? I bet you there's going to be somebody that goes, you know what, Mitch? Let's just put Tom Brady in there. What I decided to do is give you my top 4 candidates to pair with Ben, and Ben is the only guy on today's video that I'm going to give you top 4 candidates because Ben's the guy that I want. So if the Raiders end up going not with John Spytek, I think Ray Agnew is definitely a name that you got to keep in mind. The Detroit Lions assistant general manager, wouldn't be surprised if Ben Johnson brings him in. Lance Newmark is a name you got to consider because Newmark, assistant GM in Washington, it's his first year in Washington, but was with the Lions for many, many years before that. And then John Eric Sullivan, the only reason why I'm throwing him on this list is because he was the very first GM that the Raiders put in a request for. Let's go to the next Raiders head coach candidate, and that is Aaron Glenn, who interviewed with the Raiders on the same day, Friday, January 9th, as Ben Johnson did. I don't want people to say that Aaron Glenn is a Rooney Rule interview, and I think that's fair to Glenn. I think that Glenn is going to get a head job, and I think he's a top 32 coach in the NFL. And Glenn has done a terrific job, I would say, in Detroit, despite all the injuries that organization has had. I will say this, many do consider him the front runner for the Saints job, But that has changed a little bit now that Mike McCarthy has become available. To me, this is the staff that I think Aaron Glenn would go with if he was with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think Glenn brings in Ray Agnew, the Detroit Lions assistant GM. I then say that he's going to bring in Aubrey Pleasant, who is right now the Rams pass game coordinator and DB coach. He actually has some offense and defensive mind in there, but Aubrey Pleasant with the Rams, reminder, Aaron Glenn has some ties in there with some of the Rams past. And then Dennis Allen. Why Dennis Allen? Well, Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator, former head coach in D.C., because of his connections, and I think because he's got that defensive mind, and because he worked with Glenn in New Orleans, all of those reasons why I could see them bringing in Dennis Allen. But are you guys okay bringing back Dennis Allen here to the Raiders? Different rule, though. Let's go to the next name coming up here, and it's Steve Spagnuolo. And there was a report that came in from Albert Breer that said that Tom Brady likes Spags, and if they don't end up getting Ben Johnson or Pete Carroll, Spags is a name to keep in mind. But he interviewed with the Raiders on the 10th, and he was the Giants' interim head coach in 2017. I think it's a smart interview hire no matter what, just to get a little bit of a inside look on your division rival, whether you want to hire him or not. Personally, I think Spagnuolo is built to be a DC, and he doesn't have that head coach swagger that I'm looking for. But if Spags is the hire, this is what I think he ends up going with. I think he tries to bring in Mike Borgonzi, who right now is the Chiefs' assistant general manager, and a lot of people think that he might be taking that Tennessee job, so something to keep in mind. Joe Blymeyer, who is the pass game coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs and has been a name that's been thrown out there as a next potential OC. Definitely to keep in mind. And then I think they're going to go with Lou, who was just let go by the Cincinnati Bengals, former DC. The reason why Lou's name is going to get brought up is because for a long time, the one defense that would give Patrick Mahomes some fits, and if you remember, everybody was talking like, oh, Joe Burrow owns Patrick Mahomes. The Bengals own Kansas City. It's because those first 3 games, the Bengals defense did make Mahomes struggle a little bit more. They went 3-0. So I know this for a fact that a lot of people in Kansas City, Spags in particular, a lot of those front office guys love the defensive mind that Luke Anarumo, I can never pronounce his last name, but he was the DC for the Bengals, and I know how bad that defense was this past year for Cincy. They did also, though, have a lot of injuries. So coming up here, who I think the Raiders could potentially pair with Pete Carroll. And I'm somebody where I think right now option 1 is Ben Johnson, option number 2 is Pete Carroll, and then the Raiders would probably try to figure it out from there on out. So coming up, I'm going to tell you who I think the Raiders would try to pair with Pete Carroll if they miss out on Ben Johnson, to make sure that y'all never miss. You know what? Shoot or shoot, and I think PrizePicks gives me that opportunity to have fun no matter what games I'm deciding to watch, whether it's a football game, basketball game, baseball game. PrizePicks, I'm telling you what, I absolutely love them because they are the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win, up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. If you're trying to run your game with Jeremy Chuggs, this is his lineup that he is going with for the divisional round. If you want to take a screenshot, if you want to rock out with his picks, seriously, right here, prizepicks.com/CLNS. That link is going to be in the comments. It's going to be in the description of today's show. So if you think Derrick Henry is going to get more rushing yards up against the Buffalo Bills, go more. If you think somebody like, I don't know, C.J. Stroud is going to throw for more yards against Kansas City, go for the more. I'll also say this, and maybe this isn't the best advice, but if you're rooting for a player, if you're rooting for a team, go more. You're just going to have a lot of fun cheering on that guy. Let's go to Pete Carroll, and who am I going to place with Pete? So the Raiders had a long interview Monday with Carroll. They spent the entire day with him on January 13th, and I know that he's old. I know that he's got a lot of head coaching experience, but what's really important in this mix is Jed Hughes helped Pete Carroll get a job back in 2014 with the Seattle Seahawks. So who do I think that the Raiders will try to pair with Pete Carroll? This is the name that I'm going to go with. So if Carroll is brought in, I was told that they would look to be able to also bring in somebody that's got head coaching experience on the offensive side. Ed Dodds was a part of the regime in Seattle as well when Carroll went there, and Dodds has been somebody that has started his NFL career with the Raiders, has interviewed multiple times for the Raiders. Ed Dodds also worked with Frank Reich. Frank Reich is somebody who has a lot of love and gets a lot of respect from Tom Brady, and Reich is one of those people where people say, maybe he's just an OC. Maybe he's not built to be a head coach, because when he was head coach, those teams did not do well. When he was an OC, his teams did very, very well. And then the last name that I'm going to throw in there is Robert Saleh. And I say that because I was told that if the Raiders hire Pete Carroll, that they would try to bring in a predecessor for him because he's obviously 73. If they brought in Carroll, that tells me that they're also, I think, looking maybe for a little bit more of a defensive-minded guy, simply because the offensive guy is Ben Johnson. And if you don't get Ben Johnson, I could see them looking at somebody like Robert Saleh. And so for Saleh, who a lot of people think he's going to go to San Francisco, maybe you bring in Pete, you build an unbelievable Frank Reich, Robert Saleh, Ed Dodds. That's a lot of really good trios in there. But then also you tell Robert, hey, when Pete Carroll decides to hang it up, which could be any year now, we're going to promote you to head coach. So that was my prediction there. Speaking of Saleh, though, let's go to him because the Raiders requested to interview Saleh, and they will interview him on Thursday, January 16th. He was the Jets head coach from 2021 to 24. I think he's a little bit built better to be a defensive coordinator, though he did get the short end of the stick, I would say, with New York. If the Raiders decided to hire Robert Saleh to be their head coach, I would say that they would go with general manager John Eric Sullivan. Why is that the case? For those that do not know, as it stands right now, Saleh is actually a member of the Packers coaching staff. Because he's a member of the staff there, he also has ties with John Eric Sullivan. For those of you that do not know, Robert Saleh is also best friends with Matt LaFleur. In fact, those two were like in each other's wedding. And I could see them going out and hiring Mike LaFleur, the OC of the Rams. And some of you are going, why the hell would the OC of the Rams leave to be the OC of the Raiders? Because Mike LaFleur is not the one calling the plays in with the Rams. Sean McVay is. So he could finally get an opportunity to be the play caller, to be the legit OC, and that's why he's here. And then I would say they just bring in Jeff Ulbrich, who is the DC interim head coach of the Jets. Those two have a really solid connection, and that's solid staff. Let's go to Todd Monken next up here on the show. Hopefully everybody's enjoying this. I know it's a little bit different from what I typically do, and I'm going to go through these next few names a little bit quicker because I don't think there's as much of a chance that they happen. For a guy like Todd Monken, and he's done a lot of good stuff at Georgia, worked well with Brock Bowers, did a lot of good stuff, obviously, with Lamar Jackson here over the past 2 seasons. Though there is not an interview set time, the Raiders did at least request to interview him. If the Raiders go out and they hire Monken, I'm just going to go with the candidate that I think is the most likely. I would say right now, if I was a betting man, John Spytek is the most likely to be the next Raiders GM. So I'm going to throw him on here. And I couldn't just do the same names over and over and over again, so let's get a little bit crazy, shall we? What if the OC and the DC from Georgia said, I'm going to join, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to get on this Monken staff, and we're going to try to recreate what Georgia was able to do in college football. It's crazy, but that's my guess. And then the last and final name here is Vance Joseph. The Raiders requested to interview Joseph January 13th. I know when this one happened, everybody was like, oh, this is Rooney Rule. Oh, it's Rooney Rule. In fact, I saw people debating about it before the live show even started. Technically, you only need to interview 2 minority candidates, and Robert Saleh and Aaron Glenn could be those candidates. Now, if they don't end up interviewing Saleh because he maybe takes another head coaching job, the Jags are a team to keep in mind, then sure, Joseph could be that Rooney Rule candidate. But I also know that Joseph is a respected DC. And if they were to do this, let's just go crazy. John Spytek at GM. Spytek brings in his old buddy Byron Leftwich because Leftwich was on the staff when Tom Brady ended up winning the Super Bowl and when Vance Joseph was hired the very first time to be a head coach of the Denver Broncos back in 2017, he hired Joe Woods, who right now is currently the New Orleans Saints DC. If the Saints bring in a new head coach, that means Joe Woods might be on his way out. That's the Vance Joseph staff. But really, this one, I really don't think is going to happen because Vance Joseph ain't going to happen. So if you want more Raiders videos, and if you made it this far in today's show, drop a like button. It is a good way, it's a good indicator to show me, to show Chugs, to show my bosses here at Chat Sports the content that you like. And don't get me wrong, I love talking about news. I love talking about rumors, but I also like being able to do these shows because they're fun to me. It's like painting a picture. It's like putting a puzzle together. And if you want more content like that, you're going to get it this offseason because it's the craziest offseason of all time.